Hello, and welcome to the Brutal Iron Gym podcast, where our goal is to cut through the BS and deliver the brutal truth about topics related to health and happiness. Today's podcast is number 1465. The topic is nutrition, and the title is Why Calories Always Matter. I thought this would be kind of a fun conversation. What I wanted to do today was actually talk about how to carbs, fats, and protein get converted into body fat. This would be kind of fun to hear. And then we'll talk about like the science of that and how it impacts our food choices. So, dietary fat is broken down into fatty acids. So when we eat it, our body kind of breaks it down into like the building blocks of the food, of the macro. So dietary fats get broken down into the building blocks that are called fatty acids. And then if the fatty acids aren't used up for energy, they can be partially stored as body fat. Now, dietary carbohydrates, they actually get broken down into glucose. That's their kind of like building block structure. Then they can be used for energy. They can be stored in the liver. And then if there's excess on top of that, then it can be converted over to fatty acids. And then that can be stored in like kind of fat tissue. So it can get there eventually. Now, dietary protein gets broken down into amino acids, and that we use for muscle repair, among a bunch of other things that our body uses protein for. But the excess that we might have in that moment almost exclusively just gets discarded through waste. Our body does have the ability to change amino acids, the building blocks of protein, into fatty acids, but it almost never does that because it's a net energy loss. So it's really only in case of like super duper emergencies, like extreme and chronic anorexia, that might start to happen, or other kind of crazy cases. It's very, 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 very rare that protein gets converted over to body fat. So, this is fun to know because fats are the quickest to be converted to body fat. Carbs are the second quickest, but the body has kind of multiple chances to use them up. It can use them for energy, it can store them in the liver, it would do things with them before the excess then would get converted to body fat. And then protein almost never gets converted to body fat, so no worries there. So, but what's really important to remember and recognize and realize is that these conversions to body fat only happen whenever you have excessive caloric intake at the time of that meal. So when you have more calories than what you need, that's when these conversions actually happen. This is really important to know because it's not that just eating dietary fats makes you fat. It's not that just eating dietary carbohydrates would make you fat. Sure as hell, not going to get fat from protein. So it's not just like, oh, if I eat carbs, I gain weight. You gain water weight, you do not gain fat. So just eating fat, just eating carbs, doesn't automatically convert to body fat. It only converts whenever there's excessive caloric intake at that time. So if you eat a meal that matches your caloric needs at the time of eating it, whether that meal is high in carbs or high in fats, it'll be used up and nothing will be stored. But if we eat in excess, whether the meal is low carb, low fat, or low anything, whatever kind of macro makeup you make up for that meal, then the excess carbs and fats do have a chance to be converted over to body fat if the calories are in excess at that time of the meal. Doesn't matter if that meal is all dietary fats, like keto. Doesn't matter if that meal is all carbohydrates. Like if you're doing like a low-fat diet, it wouldn't matter. If you have excessive calories, whether it's carbs or fats, it can be converted over to body fat. So dietary fat has a higher chance to be converted over, less ways for us to kind of use it up. Dietary carbs has a lower chance. So you would think, okay, well, should I just eat no fat? Since dietary fat has the highest chance, I just won't eat any fat. Not a really good idea. Dietary fats do a lot of good things for us. They do a lot of good things in the body. One of them is like hormonal control, so that's really important. There's a lot of other things that fats do. So we do absolutely need dietary fats. They do a lot of purpose for our body. So that's a thing. We do need fats. And then you might say, okay, well, if you're saying fats, have the highest risk of conversion, and they might be converted over body fat, well, what about people who do keto, where the diet is all fat? So if they do a ketogenic diet, and they're eating dietary fats to be broken down into ketones and blah, blah, blah. So if they're doing a keto diet, the weight they initially lose within the first few days of the first week is only water weight. So if you I went on keto and lost 8 pounds in a week, congratulations. I don't mean to be a total smartass. I am happy for you. But it's important to recognize that you didn't lose 8 pounds of fat. The initial loss when you switch over to ketogenic diets is actually from a decrease of water storage. Carbohydrates pair with sodium, and they store in our muscle with water an energy substance called glycogen. It's basically like having gasoline in a gas tank. It's energy in your gas tank. You want to have that right in the muscles so the muscles are ready to go, have all the energy they need. So if I have carbohydrates and sodium in my diet, then I'm going to store water within my muscles, and water has weight, so I will weigh more. When I stop eating carbohydrates, my body can't store that water, it can't maintain that water, so the water starts flushing out. So when you switch away from carbohydrates and your weight goes down, it's because of water weight loss. If you all of a sudden eat carbohydrates and the next day your weight goes up, it's only from water retention. For the love of God, you did not get fat from eating carbohydrates at one meal. Whew! Now, that's frustrating for me because I do know the science of it. I'm sure it's frustrating for you because you're like, why can't I just have carbs and not get fat? Just recognize that it's not fat. You're just regaining some water storage. If you were to continue to eat the carbohydrates, that you would see that increase doesn't continue. So you might gain 2 pounds, from eating a carbohydrate meal. But then if you continue to eat carbohydrates at a moderate pace, your weight would not change at all. It would just stay like where it was. Now, if you ate at a caloric deficit with carbs, you would continue to lose weight. But that initial kind of jump doesn't just happen every time you eat carbohydrates. You're not going to continue to gain 2 pounds every single meal. So what really matters is just caloric control. Even if you eat predominantly dietary fats, if you eat in an appropriate caloric deficit, eating just below what the body needs for energy, then you'll lose body fat over time and your body won't fight to try to create new body fat or to prevent fat loss. So if you eat a diet high in fat but controlled in calories, your body will burn all the fat that you eat, so there won't be excess for fat formation. But also if you eat a diet high in carbohydrates but controlled in calories, your body will burn off all the carbohydrates, so there won't be any excess for fat formation. So whether you eat carbs or fats, it doesn't matter towards fat loss and fat formation, as long as your calories are controlled. So if you like carb foods, eat them. If you like fat foods, eat them. You can eat any food. As long as calories are controlled, you'll still lose body fat. Now, in what ways does it matter? Well, it matters in how you feel. So carbohydrates tend to digest quicker than fats, so you might have a good energy spike now, but then you'll kind of feel a little bit of a crash later afterwards, or you can just eat again sooner, and then you're fine. If you eat fats, it's a slower release of energy, so you don't have to eat again as quickly. So if people who don't like to eat and they're annoyed by eating, if you eat foods higher in fats, you won't have to eat as frequently throughout the day, and that's a nice, thing for you. If you're somebody who does like to eat, you can focus on carbohydrates. You get to eat more often, and you'll be happier eating, and you'll have just higher sustainable levels of energy, available energy throughout the day. So if you're like super active right now, about to go work out, but then you're not going to do anything afterwards, carbs is a great meal. Gives you all the energy right now, but then there's not excess left afterwards. Now, if you have low activity now, you're not really doing much and you don't plan on doing much for a little bit, like maybe you're sitting there at a computer doing work, then fats are a better choice. It's just a nice, slow, steady release of energy. And then distribution has an impact as well. Even if you control your calories per 24-hour period, if you mistime your foods compared to your energy needs, then you're going to experience kind of low energy and mood drops. You're going to experience decreased performance in workouts. You're going to have an increased dependence on caffeine supplements, and that's all the consequences of that, sleep-wise and whatnot. So you can eat carbs and fats, or carbs and fats. It doesn't really matter if you control your calories. This is why I always say that calories are the most important thing. Calories always matter. What this is super helpful to know, a couple things. Number one, eat some freaking carbohydrates if you want them. Gosh, darn it, like there's nothing wrong with them. If you like carbs, eat them. Just control your calories. If you don't like carbs, don't eat them. I don't care. If you want to eat fatty foods like bacon, then eat it. I don't care. Just track your calories. Make sure your calories are on point. You can eat carbs and or fats. You can eat them whenever the hell you want, whatever ways you want. So overwhelmingly, people overly restrict their food choices. And surprisingly, being on a diet sucks. No kidding. You don't have to say no to any food. You just have to control your calories. Okay? Now, you do have to deal with the consequences of, if I eat something really high in sugars, but I'm not supposed to eat again for 4 hours, I'm going to have a big energy jump and then crash and feel like crap for 4 hours. So you can either eat sooner and control your calories in that meal, or you can eat, slower digesting foods. So there's some consequences in how you'll feel related to whether you eat carbs or fats. But in regards to fat formation or fat loss, no difference whatsoever. Zero difference. The other benefit that this is good to kind of be aware of is if there's any diet that says, okay, well, if you reduce X, you don't have to track or count your calories. Total bullshit. Absolute bullshit. You might get a temporary and kind of immediate effect, but it's not going to be consistent, it's not going to be controlled, and you're going to be confused and wondering why things aren't working in a little bit. So simply reducing a macro, like reducing fats or reducing carbs, without any tracking or kind of counting of calories, it's an immediate effect, probably, yeah, because you're going to do an accidental caloric reduction, but it's not going to be sustainable, it's not going to be long-term, because who knows what you're going to do. So a lot of people, when they get on keto, they're like, well, I just won't eat carbs, so I'll eat whatever the hell I want. Now all of a sudden they're buttering their bacon, and all of a sudden the calories go sky high. So they might lose weight initially because of water weight loss, but then they actually start gaining weight because they're eating so many damn calories and fats. So very helpful to understand this stuff. Very helpful to know how, what food does in our body. So that way we understand why when people like me tell you it's okay, you can eat carbs, you can eat fats, doesn't really matter, just control your calories. You're like, it can't be that simple. Yes, it is. It is literally this simple. So, hopefully this was helpful. Just thought it would be fun to kind of cover. If you have any follow-up questions, just shoot me an email at brutalirongym@gmail.com. I'm always, always, always happy to help. I love answering questions. I love hearing from people. So please don't ever hesitate to reach out. Cool. Okay, well, if you like today's podcast or podcast in general, please consider sharing it. The more people we share the podcast with, the more people we can help. So sharing it on social media, sharing a conversation with a friend, just if you share it, I greatly appreciate it. And hopefully they will as well. Hopefully they'll get some benefit and they'll be happy that you did. Thank you to the people who financially support the podcast. The podcast is over $1,000 a year for hosting costs. I give an hour to it every day, and I want to keep it for free. So thank you to those who help with donations to cover the cost of everything. Oh, some of it, at least. I greatly appreciate it. If you do want to donate towards the podcast, you can do so at our website. We have an options there for one-time payment, monthly payment, yearly payment. You can just donate, even just $5 a month. It really honestly does add up. So I really appreciate everybody who does donate. It does help cover that cost. Thank you. Also, if you like the information we share in our podcast, you can find more from us on our social media channels on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube under the name Brutal Iron Gym. If you have any questions, feedback, suggestions, anything you want to know, let us know at our email, brutalirongym@gmail.com. As always, I hope this was helpful, and thank you for listening.